Good afternoon, this is Chair Browning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's now 3:03 p.m. and we're here with Public Works and hold a work session to review the summary of comments and recommendations of Ferry Fair revision. Thank you. Ms. Kane.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I have with me today, mostly doing. Is Rachel here? Actually, why am I doing this? This is a work session. Okay, so in the proposal.
You never know.
You never know. Okay, so, we obviously have the budget proposal. We have, fair that we presented with a couple options in the last public meeting, with a couple options. So we just want to talk through which options is the board wants and what we're gonna put forth into one more public hearing in a week or two for the final adoption. And Rachel, you ready to talk about all those proposal and the length and all that and expiration date and.
Yeah.
Commissioners, are you guys ready? You want to start there, or is there other things you want to talk about first?
The weather?
It's beautiful.
The weather?
All right, we're done.
If you've got any lingering yard work, no. Okay, so we have, the first document that I passed out is the draft resolution, amending the resolution that you adopted in 2023 at the conclusion of the fair study that set the 2023-2024 rate schedule. So, when I sent this over to the prosecuting attorney's office for review, they recommended another public hearing. Because the public so far hasn't seen this exact proposal, because there have been some modifications to what we're proposing since we were able to meet with citizens and collect feedback from them as well. So we have another public hearing scheduled for December 10th. We had originally had a standalone on the 26th of November scheduled, which we still have on the agenda. That was going to be for us to come to you with a possible adoption resolution. But now we can either keep that and have just a public meet. I don't know if you want to do anything with that or have the Ferry division present on something entirely different, but we do have that standalone on the 26th that we could work with if we needed another meeting. But right now, the only other thing we have on the calendar is the December 10th.
Is that the 1 o'clock work session with you guys?
On December 10th?
Yeah.
The public hearing on the 10th is.
December 10th is a public hearing. That was a formal public hearing
At 10 o'clock.
at 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
Yeah.
See,
We have 90 minutes.
And you gave us 90 minutes, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
Mhm. We will also have the resolution calls for a public comment period. Once the resolution calling for the public hearing is adopted on November 18th, which is the consent agenda that we have it scheduled for, so next Monday, then it basically opens a public comment period and the public comment period closes on the 10th of the close of the public hearing. So that's kind of the plan. Some of the things that we heard from the public going into this year's fair proposal. And even before, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing that we've heard comments on so far this year is the expiration dates on the punch cards. You've heard it, my staff has heard it, I've heard it, you already took our money, why can we not use these punch cards? And so these are the multi-ride passes in the new world of electronic ticketing. And in this fair proposal, we have proposed two things. One, to implement peak season pricing for those. So right now they're the same price year round. But when we did the rate study, the consultant had put together an optional proposal to actually have those increase in price during the peak season. And I think that that is going to help sort of with having that discounted price, purchasing at the discounted price all year round. The other thing that we're talking about implementing is a December 31st expiration date on all tickets, regardless of whether it's a multi-ride pass or a single ride pass. you've got until the end of the year to do it. We don't have to quibble about expiration dates anymore because it's just one final date. The only exception would be that if you've purchased a non-peak multi-ride pass at the lower rate, you cannot use it during the peak season. But if, like, say, for example, folks bought maybe in April, right before the peak season went into effect in May, and they made a mistake, we just tell them it's okay, just use it September through December or October through December, right? They can hang on to it and use it at the end of the year. And then during the peak season, they'll have to buy the peak season rate. And then that card can be used until the end of the year. You'd be paying the higher rate, but you still wouldn't lose your rides. I think we retain the 15% discount, so that it's not as steeper, because right now it's almost like a 30 to 35% discount in the summer when you buy at the non-peak rate. So we would just have a standard 15% discount on our multi-ride passes year round with peak season prices during the summer.
Can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
We only change like 3 or 4 instead of changing everything?
Sorry, what?
Only change 3 or 4 on the fair things? Can you make a whole lot of changes? They have a lot more things to go and.
They're like implement a little bit slower, is that what you're
Yeah, that's
asking?
what I'm getting at. We just, when you have a whole bunch of different things. It's more difficult for them to understand and for us to manage, understand which change actually changed revenue or not, or changed ridership. That's just my general, simple thinking of things.
I understand, yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance, right? I mean, yes, it is a little bit more easy to digest, but the gap is gonna continue to spread between the expenditure and revenue.
I'm not saying not change the fare
Yeah,
thing, I'm just, all the other things, I'm just wondering how many you wanna throw in there, or you just wanna start from scratch, and this is what our new is gonna be, I mean, that's just.
I wouldn't say that we're necessarily doing that. There's a bulleted list that starts on page 1 of the resolution and goes on into page 2 of the changes.
yeah,
So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullet points, there's really only 4 that kind of have to do with this ticket expiration and the multi-ride passes. So I guess let's back up a little bit. I mean, where the first bullet point is implement a 30% fare increase, and I should have said that first because that's the primary recommendation
Mhm.
from Public Works based on the revenue target that we've calculated, which is in Exhibit B of the resolution. So we need to get to a 50% fare box recovery, and in order to do that, we need to do a 30% fare increase. So projected revenue at the 2025 fare levels with a 30% increase is 1.8 million, or sorry, is 1.8 million, but the revenue target is 2.4 million almost.
and maybe we could separate it into 2 categories. So the 30% change, it's not a change we implement this year. The 30% change was what we said we're gonna do last year. So
Right.
that's the first bullet. That was just if we do nothing with no public hearing and no additional changes, the 30% is gonna implement, because we said that in the resolution last year. And the rest of them is just a cleanup of fallout, ramification, observation of behavior after we implement a fare change that we did last year, because it has been a long time since we did that. And it came to our attentions with the punch card, the multi-ride and that expiration date. So this is to clean, and also all those issues had came up 2 years ago too, with the emergency services, and we delayed that with the levy shift, not the levy shift, the EMS. What's that word? Not bond. Levy levy increase ask. So we delayed it because we don't wanna jeopardize that either. So that was also on the schedule to bring that up. I mean,
So I think I have to really like jump to the defense of my staff here too a little bit because, enforcing these expiration dates on punch cards was our #1 issue this year. I mean, both from a citizen perspective and from my staff's perspective. We don't have any guarantee that this is still being enforced 100% because we can't always be out there to ensure that's happening. So I think that the changes that we're recommending with regard to the multi-ride passes, one, give the riders and the fare payers a win in this fare proposal, because that is also the number one thing that they complained about all year long and also during the comment period that we had open. And then, with regard to expiration dates, we're going live with a new e-ticketing system in January. And we've got to have a date that those tickets expire. We can't just have tickets out there for, you know, all time. And like right now, the biggest difference between the e-ticketing system and the new ticketing system is that, or the e-ticketing and what we're doing now is that you've already arrived at the ferry and you're buying a ticket, you're gonna go over. So it expires basically when you take your trip. But now people are gonna be purchasing in advance online and they've got to have a date that they end. So really, I think adding an expiration date, as long as it's very clear what it is, I don't think will be too much of a change for people to manage. But to your point, Commissioner Wiesen, comparing data year to year and trying to figure out, well, what was this, you know, what were sales last year compared to sales this year when you've made changes to your tickets, that makes a lot of sense too. So if the board decides to not implement the new expiration date policy for the multi-ride passes and stick with 90 days, we could be supportive of that too.
Well, don't forget to mention about the safety issue too. Some of your staff is facing, we're trying to implement, and that's why there's a little bit,
Oh, yeah, I mean, they're, you
I
know,
don't know if the commissioners. know
these
that.
guys are not police officers and inevitably a expiration date on a punch card can turn into a very escalated situation.
And it had, well, not quite. to-
Where customers are yelling at our staff
Yes.
and getting in their face about the expiration date. Because they've already given the county their money, so why should their punch card expire? All of a sudden now it becomes a very personal thing, and my staff, you know, they're not equipped with the tools and the resources to enforce. You know, a situation like that. That's a police matter at that point, and we've told them to call the police, but the reality is, you know, how fast are they gonna show up and what's, you know, so it's a safety, security, enforcement, audit issue. That I think we could just clean up really easily by saying,
eliminating multi-passes.
That's the
and
one
that's-
I'm looking at too.
and you can do that too.
That's why we're having this conversations prior to, the formal
Let's
presentation.
just go through your list here.
Okay.
The 30% increase. I agree, we need the 30%.
So let's-
Agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, next.
Peak season pricing on multi-ride passes. So the next couple of bullet points, that one, and, the next two actually have to do with multi-ride passes. So I think that's basically the next big decision is, do we eliminate multi-ride passes? That's option one. Eliminate all the discounts that go along with it and
So
just.
for
go ahead.
reference, commissioners, the, target report, there is the fare here, so you can look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Weezen's looking online, but in your report, you can
Exhibit
just
C.
Exhibit C, it's
the last two
included
pages.
of the existing proposed, so you could see the different prices.
The standard vehicle, a normal would be 21, with a multi-ride 1660. That's a significant savings, and I'm not sure why we're given that. Just because they get a pass? No. I judge.
The original reason was because we wanted the people who lived on the island not to pay the full fare. That's the original thing, because
Yeah.
if I bought a multi-pass, I'm gonna use it within a certain time period,
Mhm.
and that's why we had a multi-pass reduction.
I've heard that, and I've heard that they were intended originally for frequent users. Which one holds water today? I think people would lean more toward what you just said, Commissioner Wiesen, where, you know, the full-time residents thought that was their resident discount.
But from the angry
Mom.
people, what would make it easier for your staff?
Well, either eliminating them, I think that would make it the easiest. Eliminating the multi-ride passes and the discount altogether would make things so much cleaner and so much easier for everyone.
So with the electronic ticketing,
Mhm.
how is that gonna play into eliminating or a 90-day expiration? I mean,
It's
it's still
just-
gonna be, that's no good anymore, and
Every fare is good until the end of the year. And
So
if
you
we're
would
scanning on
be-
December 30th, your ticket's still good, but if we're scanning on January 1, it's now expired.
So you're not talking about a 60, 90 day, you're just saying everything's good for 1 year. period.
Right.
Yes,
Until the
Until
next
it-
fare increase, basically, right?
But if you bought January 1 of 25,
Yeah.
the discount would be good till the whole year? Is that what
Well,
you're talking?
so what we're proposing in this resolution is that
Non-peaks
buy
are
in
not
January,
good, yeah,
right.
you buy non-peak rate in January, but in May, when the peak rates go into play,
You
that
can't use
ticket,
it.
that multi-pass is not good.
for a couple of months.
For the
Until
peak
the
season,
summer.
they can use it after peak season, and all of those tickets expire on December 31st.
right?
It's a little more confusing.
Is it gonna make it simpler for the public? That's what I'm asking you. You're the ones that are gonna deal with it. So that's,
I mean, on a logistic standpoint. And on a financial road fund standpoint. Not getting a discounts to multi-ride would be the easiest. What's the operational standpoint?
I mean, I think logistically, from a ticketing system perspective, I mean, there's so many different perspectives, right? Like, but from an operational ticketing system perspective, buying a 20-pack of tickets is convenient because it goes into the app as one QR code that can be scanned 20 times. If you get rid of a 20-pack or a 20 trip, then you've got 20 tickets in your app and you're scrolling through all 20. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't offer a 10-pack or a 20-pack just at full price. So I think the question really remains, we can make anything work in the e-ticketing system. The question for the board is, do you want to offer a discount and do you want to have an expiration date?
And further in the part A of the discount, is it same percentage discount or the same discount price throughout the year?
Mhm.
Does the electronic ticketing system have the capacity to suspend QR codes when peak season goes in and then reestablish it, reauthorize those? Okay,
Yeah, there's scanning rules set per
Okay.
fare category, so they won't be able to be scanned May through September. Mhm. Now, that still takes crew enforcement because they could override it on the scanner.
Mm.
There's never anything, you know, you don't have something that's an all-stop physical control, but when they scan that ticket, it will make an audible come up with a red X, and then the crew will have to have the conversation with the rider about purchasing a peak fare, right? So that part doesn't make it easier for my staff. I think these multi-ride passes have basically made my staff's life miserable the last year. And customers too, because, you know, of the expiration date issue that we ran into. But I think that if you were to tell folks, that live on the island that you're gonna take away the discount and the multi-ride passes completely. I don't know
That's
how
not-
that public, you know, how that's gonna play out at the public
No.
hearing. I mean, I have a feeling I know. Which is why I was hoping maybe, I don't hope anything, but why I thought I would propose a middle ground. That would kind of give them a little bit of a win, but raise the prices during the peak season, so we're not offering an immense discount. And you could make the discount 10% or 5%. You know, it doesn't have to be 15.
What was, when we did that fair, or when we had the
consultant.
revenue study done,
Mhm.
they said, I remember the consultant said that we were more deeply discounting those multi-packs than other jurisdictions. Are we more,
In line? now?
yeah, what's the norm again? It's 15%?
It's between 10 and 15%. Walk-in's a little bit higher,
Okay.
but they're thinking about going down to something more like what we have.
I would be more than comfortable at the meeting with the hearing we have, just saying, we're willing to offer a discount pass for you, but as soon as we run into any trouble at all, we'll cancel the passes at that moment. You all use out your passes, you're done.
you can't do that for every soul.
You can do that, you can say is, when our staff are feeling threatened, when our organization is slowed down, when we can't get the job done, getting people across them. So we're not
Get your
just one
seven.
person, but if we
Well,
start.
I'm more inclined to just stop the multi-passes. I'll tell you, I mean, the woman who came in and talked to me and said, it's my money on that card. What are you saying that I can't use my money? So I can't use it for the current, that fare. I should be able to use up the money, even if it's not a ride. So
Right.
they want it more like, I think that's how the Orca passes work. It's that there's money loaded onto them.
Right.
That actually would be a
So-
good way to do it.
Well, I'm just
Simple
saying,
about it.
they're gonna be unhappy no matter what.
Well,
That's
and
how I'm
there's-
with the commissioners, that they're not happy, when you give them an inch, they're not gonna say thank you, it's like, why just an inch?
Well, and the other thing that's gonna cause
That's-
lost revenue for the system is now with the e-ticketing system versus a physical punch card, a husband and wife can now share a pass. Whereas before they needed to have that physical punch card in the vehicle. And so, they had to use that within 90 days, but now they could share it with their whole family. They could text their pass to their friends. They could have their Airbnb renters use their pass and ride at a discount if they wanted. So really, I mean, with the e-ticketing and the way it works and the way that the app can, you know, and the QR codes can be shared, it's irrelevant really to have a expiration date because now you've got 4 people working towards that expiration, whereas before you only had 1.
But could you have a maximum number of discount tickets we sell a family or?
I don't think
Or-
we can't do that,
I don't think we'd be able to track that.
because I think you'll get into the questions of you track, the big government looking at the name too. I just don't think we can track that.
Assuming at some point, we're gonna know we've got this many tickets in the book or whatever, we have this many unused tickets, aren't we? We have that data available?
Not
Maybe
right
not right now.
Well, we'll get the electronic system I'm talking.
Yes,
You will
we
know how
will
many
have
tickets
that,
have
but
been sold.
people don't
that have
necessarily put their names on their tickets. You don't have to have an account to buy a ticket. You could just go buy a ticket. Which means we don't have to associate that ticket with any given person. We may not even have that personal information on there.
That's the privacy part.
Oh, yeah.
I mean. It's,
If you think you can do. I wanna make it easier for you. so you
well
tell me what
then,
you want.
eliminate the multi-ride discounts and expiration dates and just. Let us sell a 10-pack or a 20-pack of tickets, so that they
But the
can
same
have one
price.
QR code, but just have it be full price. And you can buy as many as you want, and that way you're not losing revenue, because I think one of the other things that they don't always realize is the fares are just gonna have to be higher. Next year, if we lose revenue on this proposal, right? If they share their multi-ride pass with their friends and family, more people potentially riding at a discount is not what we're looking to do.
That would be my recommendation as the road fund steward, it's to get rid of the discount.
Yeah.
Because it is, the ferry, it's really sucking up a lot of resources of the road fund when I have a lot more needs on the rest of the 800 miles of road.
I don't know that you have any other fees for which you give a discount if people buy more. You know, when you think about for if you're buying a permit or, you know, health department fees or any garbage, you don't get a discount if you bring more than a ton.
If I get 5 vaccinations at once, I don't.
A bulk
Yeah, I
price.
mean, I'm trying to think if I don't know that you have any other fees that you get
That's a good perspective.
Yeah,
multi-use discount or, you know, you have a builder that comes in, they don't get a discount if they're gonna apply for 5 permits instead of 1.
We also don't have other things where we have a fee that is this low on its percentage of recouping the cost.
true story.
Yep.
Okay, I think that's
We'll be ready for
a
some
revision
pushback.
that we wanna make in the proposal.
Higher, yeah, make the revisions and then present it as such that we would eliminate the discount.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
I don't-
Thank you.
I don't know that I heard that from one.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Three
I'm
about
not sure that
eliminating
that.
discount.
If that would make it easiest, I just wonder about cutting it all off 1 year and you could phase it. That just, you still have the issue.
Cut it off with the implementation of peak season in 25.
That's a wise approach.
I mean, just give
Period.
it some time to burn out the multi-passes that are out there right now.
Yeah, I would just,
But don't sell anymore once the e-ticketing system starts.
Yeah, don't,
so that's gonna start in early January. We're happy to honor the passes that are purchased until then. That'll be easy for us to do.
Yeah, that's what they've,
Okay.
that, I just want to make sure it's like, do we set them all up in the new ticketing system, then stop selling, but you're saying stop selling them as of January 1, but allow people to
use it.
use what they have.
Mhm.
Do they have, what's the expiration date on them?
90
You
days.
probably don't have to go till peak season,
Oh,
probably only have to go till April 1,
Right,
Yeah.
they'll all be gone by then.
if you want to do that.
Yep, that's fine.
So it makes me a little nervous with, I mean, the other thing we get pushed on in public comment is why do we make these decisions without consulting an advisory committee or a representation group out there? And so, you know, well, I think having some kind of a group to go to, even with these bigger decisions that have to be made about vessels or levels of service, need to have input. This decision right here is a pretty significant decision. And, you know, what would be our communication plan absent a commissioner appointed advisory committee out there? And we're gonna hear about it.
No, you're right.
This is a big impact to people's wallets. You know, they've been used to paying one fare with their multi-ride pass for a decade or more. And they're used to what it costs their family to go back and forth. And now, you know, it's gonna increase exponentially. I mean, it's gonna be a huge impact.
Well, I'm not a politician, but running a department, I'll provide that perspective. And take it and leave it.
Yeah.
You know, I was given some authority to make some decision. I will listen to my division managers of options. But I'm not giving away that authority to make the decision that they don't like. Because that's what is need to happen. I mean, it's like, so, I mean, I think there's that fine line of just because you have you guys are elected official, you are esteemed with those decisions. People are not gonna like whatever decisions you're gonna make, you're gonna piss some people off. And the transparency is if you don't do what I do, then it's not being transparent, it's what's happening. I guess it's just a philosophical question, is that it's you guys is, do you want to, in the negotiating, I guess that's part of your position, the challenge of your positions, or just explain why you're doing it and that just would get people pissed off.
I'm on the multi-pass, I am really firm in that is a point of conflict. The abuse of on staff is a large part of that. The duplicity of covering up your expiration date and they, you know, can't see it, and just this entitlement perspective of, you know, it's my money, I should get it without regard to what stated prices are. I'm, you know, in a heavily subsidized operation.
Mhm.
I'm done with that. So I don't have a problem with it. It's just the reality of the other part of large public comment is generally about why don't the three of us recognize it very.
And I think we have the right to say every other fee we're charging has gone up significantly over the last. We're constantly charging everybody what it costs us to do the work. And so they're the one of the last holdouts. I mean, everything, you build a house, you have to pay the cost, the real cost of our staff going out and doing the inspections, all those things. And so why are they absolutely held harmless in this? And it just doesn't seem, to me, it just seems unfair that they expect they were going to constantly coddle them and let them off the hook on the rising costs of life. And yes, I'm sorry, it's expensive, but
I think there's two elements to that question. I don't know if you want to break it down for commissioners' reason to further comment. It's like, okay, this particular issue about the raise and then the coddle, but then it's the Ferry committee part of having somebody to go to. I know Rachel and I had a lot of conversations about that, and you know, WACCM has a formal one. It doesn't solve all problems.
That's
But
one of
it's-
those things she's willing to listen to me now and tell me no.
Yes. But it's commissioner's decision if you do want to end up to want to have a formal one, but just looking at the formal one with the state and the formal one with WACCM, they don't solve all problems either. I'll just leave it at that. That's
But
obviously.
the
it's your
optics of not
decision.
going to them, Mr. Janik, he's right. Not going to them does not look good. And so who would be that group we go to since we don't have a formal group now?
I would ask, why does it not look good? Because you're not required to meet with them, and they're not a formal body. And what we are required to do is hold a public hearing and hear from all of our citizens and have a public comment period, which we are doing. So legally, we're following the statutes that are set forth for us to follow. And I understand it doesn't look good to the people who think that they should be involved. But we're simply not required.
Well, and a further argument of that is especially on, setting fees and fares and, charges for count across all the departments. There, we routinely do that, and in the same process of it's presented by departments, this is how much it will recoup and.
Right.
So there may be, maybe the idea of Ferry committee composition could be more specific to evaluating the next steps with a vessel as to what those pieces are and have it really narrowly focused instead of a forever commitment.
And I don't know if this helps, but I do talk to people who live on the island, and the ferry committee is very important to a percentage of the people that live on the island. Generally, those are the folks that you hear from a lot. But it's not a recognized committee by the majority of the islanders, even less so now. But, yeah.
And I honestly wouldn't mind being the person that goes to the ferry, who works with the ferry committee. It doesn't bother me at all. It'd be probably easier. So if we decide to do that, I can certainly offer my layer of skin to that group.
Okay. Well, let's get through this resolution though.
Yes.
I know
The
we
other-
have 30 minutes left.
Yeah, the other hot button issue. So I think, if you like the December 31st expiration on all tickets versus the no expiration now, we'll move forward with that, for the single ride tickets. And then, the other three things that were hot button items were the special fares for private charters and hazmat trips and EMS. So I'll start with the private charters, meaning, hey, I'm traveling back from Friday Harbor tonight and my ferry's late and I'm not gonna make your last ferry. Can you do an extra sailing for me at 10 o'clock? Right now it's $500 if they can get a hold of me or the crew. People pay it all the time and it just doesn't cover our cost. So we're proposing to increase that to $1,500 plus fare. Again, this is for private citizens, not for emergencies or others, although I will say it would apply to the telco and PSC in the event that their passage over for a power outage or something like that. So the only rate that we would have for emergency services that would be specific to that would be for intergovernmental emergency services like EMS, like Anacortes Fire. Those services dispatched by 911. So 911 calls in and asks us to send a ferry. We were able to meet with the city of Anacortes and Guaymas Island Fire, as well as EMS and DEM. And we had a really good conversation with them. They felt that they should be in a fair category of their own because of the nature of, the services that they provide. So we took into account their request, which is to charge for actual costs. So I had calculated in the 2025 budget what our cost per run is, and I've added some fixed costs in here for operating supplies and fuel and other fixed costs. And that is on the very last page of the resolution under the subnote 9 for intergovernmental emergency services dispatched by 911 outside the published sailing schedule when the ferry is available. We're proposing to bill for actual hourly costs plus fare. So actual costs are proposed to include hourly overtime, salaries, wages, benefits, fuel, supplies, consumables, and fixed costs associated with the ferry. So the budget's as follows: operating supplies per, did I say per hour? Yeah, per hour, are $6.91. Fuel is $12.62 and fixed costs are $54. So that means that if we had a call out, that's at the note underneath, our service is not guaranteed. If the request for services is canceled by 911 or the sheriff's department or fire dispatch, Or if the ferry is unavailable, an invoice would be generated for any costs up to the cancellation or notice of unavailability. So if I called out 2 crew members, but I couldn't get a third, which happened recently, those 2 crew members get paid because their phone rang and they answered and they hopped in the car and got on their way. But because the 3rd crew member didn't show up, then the only cost that we would have associated with that run are the 2 crew members overtime, and we would not include any of these other costs because we didn't actually fire up the ferry and make the trip. EMS liked that idea because they recognize that they cancel calls more often actually than the ferry is unavailable, but both are possible. And then they don't have the cost of a whole trip if we weren't able to get underway, or if something changed with the patient, you know, because inevitably there's things that are outside of everybody's control.
How often does that happen? Where you get 1 or 2 crew members on their way and, but can't actually sail?
It probably happens 3 to 4 times a year.
How many times do you actually get 3 to come out and sail?
How often what?
How often do you have a call out and 3
After
people show up
hours
and you, yeah,
that
how many
actually
after hours
sail.
call outs do you have in a year?
I would say on average, we have 2 a month, 2 to 3 a month, yeah. And it's increasing. Actually, the number of calls that they're getting just in general is increasing.
Because people are getting older.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, so I would be remiss if I didn't point out what I think you're gonna hear at the public hearing. Is that, you know, people are making decisions about whether or not to go to the hospital based on what they think the cost is gonna be to EMS, right? Like if something can wait till the morning, like a kid swallowed a Lego and was choking. And then that call was active and we were getting a crew coming in, but then he swallowed it. So they're like, well, he can wait till morning to go to the hospital. So they canceled it, right? So they're making different decisions now. And Josh at EMS and Anacortes and Guaymas Fire also said they can assess the patient and figure out, you know, whether a helo or other, you know, options would be better maybe. And I was at a conference recently with Lee and we heard a presentation from another ferry operator. And we asked the question specifically, what do you do after hours? And he said, if it's important enough to call 911, we are not quick enough to get there. And that was kind of like how I feel about it. It's like, we should not be the primary. And so we shared that with EMS and with fire too. And we really encourage them to have a primary plan in place, have the ferry be the backup. And I understand they have reached out to some local operators now and are starting to work on a backup plan.
Yeah, it's just a slow education. I mean, everybody that doesn't live on the island that used to counting on this ferry with the old concept, they all get it. Why are you calling? Nobody called Washington State Ferry, kept them to fire up a boat. Why is it now all of a sudden a problem? So I think that slow acceptance is finally happening. But it's still gonna take some time.
And that group I met with here, I told them the same thing, that the helicopter would be the most likely, would be the fastest, most likely, but if it's important enough to call a helicopter, at least a minute the nurses get there on the helicopter, the doctor in the helicopter, they're being cared for by people who can keep them alive. And that's not the case in the ferry.
Right.
And so again, if it's critical enough, then use the one that's going to be most likely to get up to survival.
Mhm.
And we don't quite agree with you.
Well, and there's a misconception on the island amongst some of the residents who live there that they believe that our ferry is responsible for emergency service. You know, and that we're the provider of those services and that being an essential services means that, and it doesn't, it's not the case, you know? So I think like Grace said, we're kind of finally.
Some of it is making some inroads.
Right.
You know, I remember meeting that meeting that Josh helped us put together. And of course PD understand it right away. But Guaymas Fire was pushing back quite harshly. Thank God Julie, the man, was there too to set a different perspective. So it just,
Yeah.
the
I told
pushback
them-
was
I told them
real.
it's entirely possible. If they want to work with you guys and put people on retainer or be ready to go, means that the people can't drink, they can't do anything at night, they've got to be ready to go. And they got to be paid a small stipend to be ready to go. Then that gets added to the overall cost of the ferry rides. So what would you rather do? I mean, that over the course of a year is going to be expensive. That's going to add a fairly good amount to the cost of ferry ride. So that would be your option if you want that to be the role of the ferry. And they
Right.
understood that, all the group I was talking to, yeah, that makes sense, so that probably is not the best idea.
Mm.
But that would be an option,
Yeah,
but that would mean that you'd have to have people who would commit themselves to being available, not during, you're ready to go, anytime you got a call during the times they're not normally scheduled. That's asking a lot.
that's asking a lot.
That's also, don't forget the implications of that needs to be bargained into with the union, so it's not just if the board decided to do that at the time, and for whatever
Yeah.
reason, it's not that simple.
Right.
But
Okay.
it could be bargained and it would be expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so,
I think we got.
And then the
one
other one is the hazardous materials run. So right now, we have one hazardous materials round trip on Wednesdays, 9:15 in the morning, 2 o'clock on the return. And it's only for hazardous materials vehicles, and we cannot take any other vehicles or passengers, so that's essentially a charter. And right now, they're paying the truck rate, which is, I believe, like $46 a truck, and sometimes there's one truck on that ferry. However, we do have the cost of hazmat training our crew and also hazmat compliance, because we are a hazmat shipper technically. So options here for the board would be to say, hey, we don't do hazmat transport anymore and send them down the way to, the local landing craft service that does that for a number of the other islands. Or my suggestion would be, if we are gonna continue doing them, help us to recoup some of that cost of training and, overhead and regulation, compliance, and up the price of that so that it's $7.50 plus fare. And that's a round trip. So initially we had a much higher rate for that, and people were concerned that
It was
bill would
1,500.
just, it was 1,500, would just be passed on to their cost of propane.
It's all gonna get passed on.
Either way, agreed. And so, we're recommending $7.50. plus
So
fare
can you
for that.
justify the $7.50?
Mhm.
Based on what?
Based on our cost per trip, which is about $350 just to run that ferry across the channel and come back.
You just said the cost per hour was only
That's for,
75 bucks.
that's not including staff salaries and wages.
but the staff were already there.
Sorry, so we have a cost per run that we just take our annual operating budget and we break it down for the number of trips that we do. Yes, the staff are already there, and yes, our fuel's already on board, but if you look at that cost per run based on our annual budget, that's what it comes out to. So
but the
we're
other
also
part-
losing revenue on that one by not taking other vehicles.
You're not losing if people aren't writing,
The other
just
logical
standing
argument,
in line longer.
that's the argument that's gonna come back at us, that the
Okay.
people that, at the end of the day, you're only gonna go the same number of routes you would have done anyway. Some people are just gonna spend a little more time in line, they're gonna eventually get over there, and so this is gonna be their argument coming back, that it's not, so all we could really justifiably charge them for would be the cost of our hazmat training. And those things, otherwise, all you're doing is going your normal routes, and one of them has to be predominantly or only the fuel, and at the end of the day, everybody gets over back and forth.
Okay, so we don't like this.
I think that'd be a hard enough to figure out,
That's
Ron's point is exactly
unreasonable,
their point.
because
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go Anacortes 4 times today, I'm only gonna go 3 because this one hazmat's going, I don't understand. You think they're changing their use for that one day when there's hazmat passengers and people riding the ferry? Are they doing an extra run that day just because?
I think you have to extra one, you can think of it and make an extra one for the,
Or the paying customer's gonna pay?
Oh, I think when they're talking about them paying, they're talking about for their cost of propane.
Well, no, I'm talking about the guy sitting in line.
Okay,
What you're talking about here, because you're losing revenue. You're not losing revenue because that revenue that you're still gonna get it.
I see the argument.
Delayed later on the day.
I see the argument. Okay. Fair enough. So
If you have
it,
a hazmat cost of training, yes, that should be, there's no question.
but we also have hazmat compliance and liability.
Have that in.
Has
That's
to.
all.
So I don't think that we could come up with exactly what that number is. I mean, how do you estimate liability of a propane truck exploding on the deck of the ferry? You know, I mean, that could be anywhere from a catastrophic incident to a near miss. I mean.
No, but you can take the actual cost you're paying, like you have an insurance policy, so how much of that is for hazmat? How many hours do your staff spend in training for hazmat so they can do that? So you can take your hard costs that you have divided by the total number of hazmat runs you do. That's what I thought I was
Yeah, and
hearing.
then assuming 52 trips a year, a week, yeah, 50 trips a year divided into that, how much would that be added to the ferry cost for that truck? And that would at least cover those training costs.
Okay, we were looking at more like a charter, it's chartering the ferry, but
Yeah.
if we don't wanna look at it like
I
that.
think it'd be argued very easily, but from the other side, that in the end, everybody still gets back and forth across the.
Just a little bit later, couple
Yeah,
minutes
yeah.
later.
And so you're not doing an extra ride for it, you're just, and those are regularly scheduled rides. They're just filling it up differently.
Okay,
Just letting you know too, that like, different ferry operators have different perspectives on the transport of hazmat materials. Pierce County doesn't do it at all. They've got to go private charter. But Whatcom County does do it,
I don't
so.
think Washtenaw.
Washington
State
doesn't
Fair
do
does
it. Mm-mm. That's why there's all those landing crafts running around transporting those propane and gasoline trucks. So if that's something that you want to see stay and that price adjusted, we could get that information. Can we talk, or, okay, questions about anything else on the? I kind of want to talk about schedule.
And the
Nice.
rates per hour, in the excess runs, you're 1,500. And that is based upon. How'd you come up with 1,500?
Over private charters.
Just private.
So you can set that rate at whatever you would like. I don't know that we have to have.
That we come
Actual
up with
cost of
1,500.
operation, or is it just a number you pull out of the air?
If you want these all to be actual costs of hard data, like Trisha was saying, then I'd have to go back to the drawing board.
I don't think that's what he asked. How did you, like, you have here, you came up with the $6.91 for supplies and $12.62. How did you come up with 1,500? Did you just pull it? Did you just pick a number or is it based on something real?
Well, I mean, 3 hours of overtime for the staff is roughly 1,200 plus, the $350 per run. Was went
So you
into
have a
that,
number
but
there, so that's
I don't
what
have, if I had to put a spreadsheet together on it, I would.
No,
ask for
I
a
think
little
that was
more
what
time.
I
that
was
answered
saying.
it.
Okay,
That answered
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And I don't mind charging, I mean, the overtime, I don't mind making it a daunting thing. People can plan better or make accommodations.
They're just trying
Well, and
to
I
figure
think
out.
that's
We
kind
shouldn't
of,
have to move a whole ferry and crew on overtime to accommodate someone's late schedule.
well, and that's kind of the point, I think, I mean, if you're working a night shift and you're expecting to go home and all of a sudden your manager calls you and says, hey, you've got to stick around and do an extra run. I mean, we're firing up the whole entire ferry and lowering the bridge on the other side and going way out of our way just to transport one vehicle. I mean, I think, I agree, it should be a cost that's like, whoa, a hotel room is way cheaper.
I think that was part of one of the reason why,
That's
that we
what I'm
just,
asking.
yeah,
So
I
yeah.
agree.
this is the
So it's kind of a big number for that reason too.
I agree.
Which is why I don't wanna have to say it's based on what I actually think it's gonna cost. I think there's an inconvenience fee to the crew, people that gotta get up and work the morning shift that might get called out for that.
I think the commissioner was just trying to ask the question so that when it was asked, it's not just because, it's not asking for doing further analysis, it's based on some thoughts, which was, okay, on average, without spending too much time diving into the cents and dollars, this is why we come up with 1,500, and the gut check is, it's cost more than a hotel room. I think that's just plenty enough.
The 1,500 is good. How, then it says, and $500 for additional trips. How often do people make
Yeah, so,
multiply runs
well,
once it's been deployed?
And here's the thing is like, this is mostly for PSC and Patelco, to be honest with you.
Oh.
Because they will use our ferry all night long. They just have an endless budget. I mean, they'll send crews over in the middle of the night and then when their crews are ready to come off, they'll call us again. So we'll get 3 or 4 calls from PSC or Patelco in the middle of the night at all hours. And my staff, it's not their favorite runs to do because they never know how long they're gonna be, because inevitably the first crewman that goes over says, I think it's just a small problem. We'll be ready in 20 minutes. So they hold the ferry over there. And then inevitably after 2 hours, they're like, nope, it's gonna take us 4. Well, the call out's 3, so they go home. Then they call me when they're ready. Oh, we have to send over more trucks. Now it's after that 3 hours of overtime. So now we're on a new call out, potentially a whole new group of staff coming in and getting paid. more
Is it
trucks,
only
more
500 for
people.
that second call that night? Or is it 1,500 again that night?
It's 500.
Well,
1,500.
well, so that's the thing about the successive trips is like, if we're going back and forth on one call, then it would be 500 after that. Like I can think of the night we had the fire on the north end of the island, we were running trucks back and forth.
So maybe
all
it's
night.
within that 3 hour
But
call out.
within that
period,
yeah.
it's 500, but beyond that.
A
it's
new
not.
call out starts a new 1,500. And then they'll call at, 4 or 4:30 and say, okay, we're all ready to come off now. And it's like, well, we start running at 6. Do you want to wait? And 500 is so cheap. Of course, they're gonna come in. So primarily, this is for PSE and Patelco, but also for, that occasional private customer that's just like, oh, I think, I want a part of the ferry for a wedding, maybe.
Yeah.
People will bring their wedding guests back on a later run.
But I think that Tricia's question is, it's good to consider how we clarify it. So like you said, 1,500 first trip. What if it's like, wait for 2 hours? And I'll come back. So it's less than 3. So is that 15 plus 500 and 500 because it's 2 hours or like?
No, this is a trip immediately after. So if you're,
So it's 1,500 plus 500 for additional within the 3 hour period or something like that. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
yeah, if you want to put it, if you wanted to say per 3 hours, we could say that.
Yeah, for 3 hours.
Yeah, I'll help clarify, but that's a good question.
I think we should
Tricia.
define what,
Okay.
an after hours deployment is and what it includes.
Okay.
And when it steps up to the next 1,500, which is the callback or hour 4,
Yeah.
you're into a new fee structure.
Yeah, I think this exercise is good because you guys are removed from it and asking these questions like, what about this, what about that, without thinking of the specific incident.
Well, and so I guess there's another piece to that though, like what if, my staff's on a 3-hour call out, but they think they only have to make 1 trip. Now they've gone home, they're still getting paid for that 3 hours, but they're not there to do the runs. So they call back within the 3 hours and I have to call out a new crew. Right? So I think some of it's gonna be case by case, but I understand wanting to put more clarity to it. So let us put our heads together. on
What's the
that,
barge
see what we
fee?
can come up with.
How the board's charge on that? Related,
The private,
no private, yeah, how the private,
I have no idea.
we should have something prepared.
Asked, the private, what's his name, Greg?
Well, so hold on. So we wanna know what they would charge for a night?
Just to make sure we're
Suggesting
hired.
PSC call them instead of us.
No, we're not. PSC won't. They'll call us because we're way more convenient. They can fit way more trucks on our boat and they have to take a power pole over and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And those trucks are big. Those rigs are massive. And they can't fit on the barge.
How often do you get more than 1 call out in a night? We're talking about if you have to, if they're within their 3 hours, you get a second call out. How often does that happen?
It's usually during weather events or an escalating fire or medical situation. Sometimes we have to take sheriffs over, sometimes we have to take coroner over. Maybe 3 times a year. Off the top of my head, not looking at data. Yeah,
The other question I have is with these private and so forth, you wanna waste the time with us plus the fare or no?
yeah, I agree. Plus the fare is just an annoyance.
Oh, just,
I mean, it's always been there. We can take it out.
Well,
That's fine.
I'm asking,
no, no.
operation, does it make a difference or not, or?
I think it made a difference when it was so cheap to go over after hours. But now, probably not.
Right, we've done 3 minutes.
Oh,
Grace, anything else? 3 minutes?
Oh, it's good.
The hours, you wanna talk hours?
Yeah.
yeah, so, it's November 14th, so it's 6 weeks until the end of the year. We are implementing our new ticketing system. We're penciled in for the week of January 6th. I would really like the new fares to line up with the rollout of the new ticketing system, so we're not selling at old fares for 2 weeks and then switching over. Do we think, given that we have the public hearing on December 10th, that you would be prepared to make a decision soon after, so that I can get going on all the new materials and work that needs to be done to build the software? Or do we want to try to push out to say like February for ticketing system launch and effective date of the fair and parade.
Again, this is what's easiest for you for successful outcome.
Makes
So,
sense to tie the fair to the implementation of the ticketing system, unless the ticketing system doesn't happen. I mean, I'm optimistic.
It's going to this time.
We today,
I
we just
love
have a
optimism.
successful
So just today,
test,
yeah.
just today.
Yeah, we just I mean, we're into production testing now, so that's where we couldn't get before. And I've actually seen purchases go through on the app, the website, and at the terminal at the office, which is what I was waiting for
Which is
before
a
I can say
huge
that.
step.
Yeah, that just happened like an hour ago.
We were all
Right
picked
before this
aside, we
meeting.
believe.
Yeah. But I think also too, how much time would you like after the public hearing to kind of absorb and digest, and is 2 weeks enough to come back with a proposal, or do we want to wait and hear what we hear at the hearing and make a decision after that?
We generally wait a week or something, just to
Okay.
digest and
thanks, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Because we could react by still tie the two together, so the launch dates, if we need more time, launch dates of January 6th could be January 16th.
Well, it can't. It has to either be January 6th or get pushed out to February.
Because of jazz
Well,
schedule.
and anchor. And
And then
everyone's
anchor.
So,
The ability to be here.
it's either January 6th or we're into February. But if we're gonna get rid of the multi-ride passes and the expirations, maybe a little bit more time to do communications on that. Cause then there's press releases and communications too that have to go out to people to, so that my staff doesn't have to hear that someone heard about the fare increase for the first time when they showed up in line.
Right, and it could be, then we can delay the launch day in February, if the board's choose physically, sounds like January 6th would be done, but if we need more time for outreach, then you guys could set the date in February.
Again, February is fine to do it right, whatever it takes to do it right.
Okay, I think that's gonna be the most successful,
I
Yeah.
agree 100% with that.
especially with the communication.
I think that would give a little bit more time for outreach.
And
Okay, and do we want to keep the November 26th standalone for any reason?
I don't think so.
Do you want to hear about anything else very related on that?
we're gonna talk about options, replacement, that kind of stuff, or what? A whole lot.
Well, maybe we could replace it, so when this was scheduled, it was scheduled for the hearing. And we're running on time for the fair, and maybe instead of canceling that other work session, we'll switch that work, I know you want, there's too many work, so we can switch that work sessions to talk about the options for the new fair.
And maybe you want to talk about what sort of citizen group you want to create. I know that everything.
Task force.
Task force.
So that it
Yes,
has a
thank you, that was-
temporary,
Right, maybe we could
Connotation.
have that conversation tied to,
Would that be for this fair proposal?
no,
Okay.
for the,
no,
Or future
task
the
force
fair?
is, yes.
Okay.
Task force not about operations,
the
but
new
about capital.
yeah, cap.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That was good, thank you.
I just wanted to say, it's got a lot of PTSD on our part, and thank you for being patient with us, in our response and walking through it and clarifying your questions.
I can't tell you how
She's
nice
saying I have
it will
PTSD.
feel to not be talking about the ferry for a while. And I think that after.
Well,
When will that be? When will that be?
just an observation that Lee is on the Zoom meeting. I want to make it clear that, there have been some inappropriate comments about how the ferry is staffed. And to me, it is a godsend that Lee is in that role to support you. And it has been too much for too many years. And so having a lieutenant is essential, and I think it's an essential part of the operations of a very complex system. So
I
Lee,
really-
thank you for being here.
Thank you,
And,
Lee.
Yeah, Rachel, I always think you're a hero, but Grace, you do a good job.
I can't do it without you guys supporting us, so thank you, really.
And very important, they need to know that the 30% increase is not because of Lee. And every time we hear that, kind of thing, we gotta go, really?
He
Yeah.
doesn't think that much.
I have no patience for that, but the expertise that he brings, set and ready to go and understanding of, anyway, it is, you are a godsend to the whole Ferry program, Lee, so thank you.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that comment.
Okay,
All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Do we have to end meeting and stop recording?
We aren't gonna end it, we're just gonna kind of cruise on into the next.
we have
right?
4 o'clock
Yeah,
right here.
right here. Thank you, guys.
You can see.
Thank you. What is this about?
It's just-
Irish people, I'm not saying.
It's our weekly, end of week briefing, I call it coordinate meeting.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Grace. Bye.